So I'm guessing you're home today.
I am home today.
Awesome.
I was not earlier.
No, you coming back from a trip today, or?
No, I was just out at a meeting. Congressman Banks, Congressman Stutzman. He's one of our Indiana congressional people. I had a chance to get lunch with him today. So
cool.
Yep.
Well, it seems like, from your bio I've got here, you're super involved in the community. So it seems appropriate.
Yeah, that's how you make it happen in funeral service, Well,
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This is awesome. Yeah. It's good to see you a couple months ago. Thanks again for always feeding us well at the unconference.
Absolutely.
Was that just like, last year you just decided we're gonna cook and.
Yeah, I can't even remember who came up with it first, me or Ryan. He said, can you bring some food? And I said, yeah, we'll do that. And then I was thinking, well, hey, you got a grill? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, I'll grill.
In 120 degrees.
In 120 degrees, yeah. Almost didn't even need the flame on.
Always ends up being so awesome. Appreciate you doing that. Well, let me do this. I've started to read just the last couple episodes. I've started to read the bio that I'm sent. So then it's kind of like a little bit of an outline that we can kind of hit as we, kind of hear your story. So I'm going to start with that and then, start asking some questions. But David McComb brings extensive experience in the death care industry to Inman Shipping, having been involved since 1986. As the fourth generation to operate D.O. McComb & Sons Funeral Homes, the second largest funeral home in Indiana, he served as president and is a licensed funeral director in both Indiana and Ohio. He's also a certified crematory operator, holding a Bachelor of Arts in Business from Indiana University and an Associate of Arts in Mortuary Science from Mid-America College of Funeral Service. Accomplished entrepreneur, Mr. McComb has founded and acquired multiple businesses, including Birkmeyer Monument Company, Terra Services, Premier Pre-Need, Estate Security, Eagles Wings Air, Fort Wayne Financial, Inman Shipping Worldwide, and Travel Planned by Inman. If somebody asks you that question, I don't know if you could even remember all of those, man. It's a good thing you got it written down. He's a founding stockholder in Practice Protection Insurance Company, SILAC, is that how you say it? SILAC?
Yeah. SILAC. Yep.
And a stockholder and board member of Osiris FDRI. He's actively involved in the death care profession, having served on the Indiana State Board of Funeral and Cemetery Service for 14 years and acting as liaison to the Attorney General. Additionally, he's a member of the National Funeral Directors Association, the International Cemetery Cremation and Funeral Association, and Fiat IFTA. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, it's an international shipping group for funeral service.
Okay, and is a contributor to the Funeral Service Foundation. A lifelong resident of Fort Wayne, Indiana, David is dedicated to giving back to his community. He serves in various capacities with organizations such as Junior Achievement, Aaron's House for Grieving Children, the Allen County Drive Alive Steering Committee, the Business Forum, the Fort Wayne Urban League, St. Francis College School of Business, the Board of Directors for Salem Bank and Trust Companies, 28 banks, the Board of Directors for the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo, and the Fort Wayne Ballet. Boring. No. Oh, man, dude, you've done so much. Holy cow. I don't know how we can even cover all this. I've got a million questions. I did when your bio came in, but yeah, wow. Let's just start with like right now. You're probably busy every day right now, but today, what's like a typical day look like for you?
Well, actually, I'm very fortunate to not have any 2 days the same. I like a variety of things to do. When I sold D.O. McComb & Sons back in 2016, I thought, maybe I'll play a little bit more golf, maybe go fishing a little bit more. And, a couple months later, I'm going, I'm really not happy with this. So I need to be, mentally and physically engaged in different things, or I guess I'm not the most productive I can be. I look at it like going back to grade school. When you were in grade school, you had, many different classes. You had math class, you had science class, and so forth. And that's kind of the way I look at my life. I have different classes during the day, but it's all about education, all about serving. And anyways, but Yeah, typical day, talk to colleagues on the phone like you, and, hopefully if it makes sense, do business with people around the country. Everybody's got a different bent and how they serve the consumer. And I'm interested in all of them. Even though if I can't do business with them, I find the ways people are interacting with our communities incredibly interesting. Anywhere from these guys that are, doing these bodies, and they're putting mulch, and it's a new way of cremation. And I've talked to them and quizzed them about it. And I'm fascinated by it. What I wanted for myself, maybe not, but I am fascinated by it. So when people ask me about these kind of things, then I'm knowledgeable about them. But and then that's all about having a general knowledge of being able to serve best in your core focus.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome. So, man, you got my head spinning. I'm thinking about a lot of things here, but let's start with, I would love to hear just the history of D.O. McComb and Sons, the funeral home, and your family. So like upbringing and intro to the funeral service and the funeral home.
Yeah. Well, everybody's very proud of their family and so forth. And everybody started off in unique and interesting ways. And my great grandfather was named D.O. McComb, and he was a superintendent of schools here in Northeast Indiana from 1900 until 1925. And then in 1925, he started the funeral home. You might probably have already picked up on it already. Our funeral home is 100 years old this year. And anyways, so he and his son, Walter Sr., they started into the business. And one of their partners was the brother of the Monsignor of the largest Catholic parish in the area. And he died really quick after they started the business. He died within, I think, the first year. And first year they did 20 funerals, and they moved on to another street, and everything just kept going in the right direction. And then, I hate to skip over generations so quick, but there's just not enough time. But my grandfather, he started the ambulance business, and many funeral homes offered the ambulance business, or ambulance service. But what was different from ours, we did it for free. We had guys in town there, they're taking $2, $3, back in the 40s and 50s for delivering somebody to the hospital. It was so cheap. He just says, why don't we just do it for nothing? And what was really interesting is one of our competitors said, hey, McCombs are doing it for nothing. Why don't you just go use them? And so, and people did. And so our funeral home just continued to grow. And the ambulance business was one way. In 1978, the last year we were in business, we did 5,500 ambulance runs, all for free. And of course, when somebody has a death soon after that, they remember you did it for free, and then they call you. And then another big change was we started adding branches around the city. We ended up with 8 in the area, not all in Fort Wayne. And in the 80s, we offered pre-need. Our firm was one of the first to do contact management back in 1986. And we have contact management software right now that's on its 4th version, going into its 5th. We started out with this product called Telemagic. It was in the DOS era when, the little green numbers were on your screen, and the monitors, a 1.5 feet thick. And you need to figure out that you have to spell Fort Wayne the same way, or you can't get decent reports. We found out one month we spelled Fort Wayne 14 different ways. And so you learn a lot from stuff like that. Anyways, and then that was the intro into pre-need and the kind of the golden era of pre-need in the 80s. And we had a third-party marketing company, and we were up to 31 or 32 funeral homes throughout Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio.
And was that Premier Pre-need?
Premier Pre-need.
Mm-hmm. So this is the same Premier Pre-need I see at the booth, at the trade shows now, or a different one?
Okay. That's another story.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that some other day, because that's an interesting question. And you're the only one astute enough to bring that up. So I'm really not even prepared to talk about it. But anyways, no, I'll talk about anything you want. But nonetheless, that's an excellent question. So in Indiana, at one point, just our funeral home, we had as much money in our trust, in our forethought funeral trust, as the whole state of Indiana did in their master trust.
Wow.
So we were penetrating the market pretty quickly, and it was something that people wanted to do, and funeral homes had not evolved into pre-need like the cemetery people did. Cemetery people have always been more on the selling side of excellence than the funeral home side. They were way ahead of us as far as sales, and so we were losing burial vault sales, and then it was getting to be we're losing casket sales, and then you got to wake up and do something. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and that's the tact we took, and we quickly gained back market share. And anyways, long story short, by the time we sold our company in 2016, we had 64% market share in this area. When I started in business, we were about 41 or 42%. So the pre-need movement really moved the needle for market share.
What was driving your success with pre-need?
Contact management.
Oh, it's contact management. Okay, so
yeah, it's contact management.
Organized.
And the thing is, that's a mouthful when you say that. I would have to say, if you don't have good management as far as managing your database, it's worthless. So you have to have a regimen that follows managing the database to make it worthwhile. And it also depends upon properly training the people that are making phone calls and putting meaningful entries in the notepad section of the database. Because if you're talking to somebody and you're not writing down anything after a phone call or an interaction, you're not advancing the selling process. And it's just so weird. People have this really great software out there, and you're not using their contact management piece. Our contact management piece was so advanced when our phone rang. If somebody was sitting there at their desk, when the phone rang and their information would pop up on the phone, and that was 15 years ago that we had that. And and that goes to service excellence and so forth. And people, somehow there's been a disconnect with service excellence and technology. Some people have kind of shied away from it and so forth. We embrace it. We spent a lot of money on it we shouldn't have spent, probably wasted money. But nonetheless, our products, still exists out there. We have 3,500 users, and it's a good people that use it are very successful. And in Precoa, they've successfully used their contact management strategy, and of course they've taken it to the next level. Those guys have done a really, really great job out there.
Mm. So would you say your business, getting a degree in business at IU, helped it? Because it sounds like a lot of the things you're doing, strict standard operating procedures, having you ran the funeral home like a business, right? It sounds like when you took over, was that, you think, partially because of your schooling, or where do you?
Maybe there's a few classes that did. I'm not a real proponent of that you have to go to college kind of thing. Our country is so short on people like plumbers, electricians, bricklayers, and stuff like that. And those guys, I don't care what AI is going to do. It's going to be a long time before you teach a robot how to lay bricks. It's going to be a long time before you teach a robot how to, sweat a pipe. It's just, I don't see those kind of things being under pressure in the next, 20 years.
Yeah.
But in education is great. If you're going to go into private equity or something like that, getting a degree from Stanford, Harvard, that's key. You have to have it. They're not going to look at you unless you do.
Yeah. Yeah, but it sounds like, you're just very astute when it comes to business. And it sounds like what a lot of your, just hearing your story there is what I would kind of pin that on, right? Like you knew what you were doing.
Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't.
So what was your family like? Your dad was, you're fourth generation, so your dad was running it too. Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have one brother, Doug, and he and I would, trade off on all kinds of stuff. I would, 1 week I would do, more funerals, and he would do more, management meetings. And then the next week we'd kind of switch around and go back. And then it just ended up being I handled most of the administration kind of stuff, meetings, etc., and he handled all those, service directors and arrangers. And that brings up an interesting point. That's one of the keys to our success. Is we had two different staffs of funeral directors. We had, and larger funeral homes can do this. Smaller ones, it's just the only way you can do it. But we had a staff of 5 or 6 service arrangers, and then we had another group of people that were the service directors who actually took the funerals out, executed the funerals, and it was spun out of the fact that when cremation was first started coming on, if you have 20 people licensed that could possibly doing funeral arrangements, and you're doing 20% cremation, it comes down to you might have one of your people, funeral directors, sitting in front of a family that has done 1 or 2 cremation arrangements in a year. And you cannot serve somebody well in the cremation arena unless they're skilled and practiced. And so it just didn't make sense for anything else other than to have fewer arrangements to do the arrangements, so they got good at it. You heard of specialization in embalming,
Yeah.
and then the kind of the next step is specialization in service. But we took it to the specialization in arranging as well, and so we had specialization in all those things. And there are pitfalls in it. There might be some people watching to say there's pitfalls in it because of the relationship with the family. And that could be an issue. But if you make a proper handoff, and I had a football on a tee in the office to remind people to make a good handoff, because if you're not going to be there on the weekend, you want to make sure you get on a call and tell, the next of kin that, hey, I'm going to be gone for the weekend. My kid's got a baseball game out of town, and and Joe Jones is going to be. He's going to be the one that's going to be handling things from here. I've worked with him for 5 years. He's a great guy, but here's my cell phone. If you need to talk to me about any detail, feel free to use it. So as long as you did something like that, it worked out very well. But, the results economically were tremendous. They were stunning when we did that, the difference in the results.
Well, I think that that's important too, that handoff. We just like sales 101, people don't like, we've got this process always where you take someone to the finish line, and then it's like, oh, now that we're here, like, see you later. Heard it compared to like, you're going to, you take somebody to get married, and like on the wedding day, it's like, all right, now here's Bob. I'm going to introduce you to Bob because he's, who you're going to go forward with here. So you got to handle that properly. Right. So that's right. Interesting to hear that you guys had that done so well. So 8 locations. Did you own cemeteries as well? Crematories?
We had a crematory, and we had a monument company. Yeah, we had a small cemetery. When we first got it, it was doing 15 to 20 burials a year, and we owned it for 6 or 7 years. By the time we were done, it was doing about 125 to 130 burials a year. So we turned it into a real cemetery. The Vietnam era battle tank that was sitting out in front of our Coliseum here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, had become a liability for the Parks Department. So we worked out a deal for this 60,000-pound tank to be taken out and put in our cemetery. And we created a veteran section, which is tremendously beautiful. And the tank was in absolutely beautiful shape. So we have lit up at night and driving by there. It's if you have a loved one there, you're proud of it.
That's awesome. What do the monuments look like in that veterans area?
They're upright and flat. They're both. It accepts the one that the government gives, or you can have your own. Either way. So it's a variety.
Okay.
It's not a memorial park. It's a pretty much. There's no restrictions on monuments on it. You can have anything you want.
Cool. And so the monument company, was that the Berkmeyer? Did you bought that one?
Company.
Okay.
And that company had been in business. Of course, a lot of monument companies have been in business over 100 years. And that one certainly was, from the mid 1800s, I believe it was 1860 something. But it was a long time.
Wow. Let's talk about some of these other companies you've acquired or founded. So Terra Services. What was that one?
Yeah, well, that was when we, for a period of time, we had a company that would dig graves for the smaller rural cemeteries. And we just provided those ground services for the smaller cemeteries that did not have, they didn't have a staff, where they were run by an association. If they did, less than 75 calls a year, which there's a bunch of those cemeteries in our area. And so we did opening, closing services for them. We install monuments. And so we did it over a 2, 3, 4 county area. And it was a smaller business, but people loved it because they didn't have to go hunt down the guy that normally digs basements. And, they knew we knew what we were doing. And, the only key thing was properly marking out the grave and probing the grave to make sure you don't do any damage to the burial vaults on either side.
Yeah. How is that done? I've never seen that.
Well, you probe. First, you have to have a map, a plotting of the cemetery, and then there's the pins that they put in after they plot it, and then you measure, and then you guess. There's no exact thing because there's ground on top of it, so that creates variables. And then you probe, and then you make sure you know where you're going, and then you start with a backhoe.
And so when you're doing like a burial, if they, and one, like I think my parents have got like a shared plot, right? So how do they do that? Do they do them side by side in those situations?
Yeah, there can be, in our area, there's double depth, but, you only have to go to the first depth because the first one is below, and it's, of course, it's like a concrete mausoleum that's too high. And so in Indiana, you have to dig up, the top 2 feet, take off the top part of the container, and then you place the first person in, and then the second person would go in after that, when they die.
Okay. So, but it's like the vault basically is like a double deep vault in that situation.
For the pre-construction, the pre-placed burial vaults, yes. Now, most of them we did were the ones were like a Wilbert type of burial vault or Doric type of burial vault, where we would dig the grave, and then they would place the vault, and then we would come back after the service and bury. Okay.
No, interesting. This is an area of the profession I've never really, I think, asked very many questions. So when you say they would place it, so like would Wilbert or Doric come out and would they put the vault in?
Yeah. So the order would be, we dig the grave, place the contents of the grave on the side. The burial vault company would come out, place something appropriate over the top of it, so you're not looking at bare dirt. They would set their burial vault. If it was a graveside service, and most of the small cemeteries, that's what it is. They don't have a chapel. And then a tent would be placed, and then the funeral home would come in with the casket, do the committal service, place the casket on top of the lowering device, and then they would lower the casket into the ground. Then they move away the device. And then after that, they pick up all their equipment and then leave, and then call us and say, you can finish the burial on this grave. And then that would be that.
Okay. Interesting.
And eventually we got out of that, and we made a deal with the burial vault company, and then they took it over. And it was a good deal for everybody.
Oh, there you go.
Because it only made sense. Because why would you have 2 different companies going there where you only need one?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's a problem with funeral service. We're stuck with a lot of tradition that isn't so efficient. And so if you see something that's not working and it can work for somebody else, then you go make a deal. And you say, hey, we're already out here. I think there's an economics in this for both of us.
Yeah. And are there rules to the depth? I mean, everyone says 6 feet under, right? I mean, is that actually like like a lot of that? Well, it's not so much
how deep, it's how much earth is on top. And I don't know other states, but I would believe most states, you need to have 24 inches of dirt on top of the burial vault cover. So if you would stick a probe in and it doesn't come to 24 inches, it needs to.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, that was educational. I've never like asked about any of that stuff.
And Curtis, I haven't been asked about stuff like that in 20 years. So these are all good questions.
Yeah. So your next one here is listed as Premier Pre-Need. I don't know how deep we want to go into that.
That was our third-party marketing company. And I don't think so. We kind of already touched on that, and everybody kind of knows how that works. But I will say this about if you're a funeral home and you don't want to do your own pre-need, I'll tell you a couple things to think about. One is whose workman's comp does that go on if somebody gets hurt? Is it yours at the funeral home, or is it the third-party marketing company's work comp? If somebody, and then the litigation thing, there's just some lines in there that are not real clear. And then you also want to check in with wage and hour to make sure that that person on your property is properly categorized. Are they an employee of the third-party marketing company, or are they kind of an employee of yours? And there's just some lines in that business that I think are a little unclear. There's some of our pros out there probably can clear that up, but that was always a little troublesome for me, is some of those lines aren't real clear of who this person that's selling pre-need in the funeral home, who do they really belong to? Do they belong to the third-party marketing company, or do they belong to the funeral home? And, in every state, there might be a different answer for that, too, because some states are employment at will and some states aren't. Some states have unions, some don't. Like if you're in Chicago, there's a union, and there might be implications for that. So before you take on a third-party marketing company, I'd ask those kind of questions.
And your preference would be what? That the third-party marketer is the employer and handling all that?
Yeah, I think that makes most sense, since that's who's they're getting paid by them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've heard that both ways, where you got, employee at the funeral home that becomes the pre-need rep, right? And they're working with a third-party marketer, but that's a really good point.
You just got to make sure that that's everybody's in agreement on that. You got to, unfortunately in business, you have to look in the worst case scenario to say, if this guy gets hurt, if he falls down the stairs and breaks his legs, what are the implications?
Yeah.
Who's paying short-term disability? Who's at fault?
Yeah.
I know, ugly questions for business.
No, great questions, though.
Business is so simple, everybody should do it, It's a really simple thing,
Yeah. Yeah, I think customer value propositions a lot of times are common sense, but when it comes to those types of things, right, it's like really just trying to figure out what is the easiest thing, and what's going to be most beneficial, because I think the more you can hand off and the more you can delegate as a business owner, the better. So
that's where I'm at too. I think it's way more efficient. It goes back to that thing, like where you arrange a funeral. If you're a guy that arranges one cremation funeral per month, you're not going to be as good as a guy that does it like every day. You're going to be much better in what the family's needs are. I mean, you're going to be, you're not going to be very efficient for the family.
With that model, did that prevent, would you say, too many direct cremations versus still having just cremation be the method of disposition to have services? Did that help quite a bit?
Yes, it really did. And when somebody feels comfortable offering cremation, they're going to show all the creative ways that you can make this a really meaningful cremation service. And if somebody doesn't do it very often, then it just comes down to, you're going to offer them the cheapest thing. In many cases, unfortunately, that's the truth. And, and then the skilled cremation arranger is going to show you things like jewelry. He's going to show you ways that you can have a memorial service at a very unique place. They're going to talk with you about, I know you didn't want to have a formal viewing. Let's talk about an identification process that would be really nice. And, we'll partially embalm, and we'll dress up, use makeup, so your memory and your confirmation of this death that has occurred is going to be a positive. But I realize you don't want to have some big to-do. And you can find those gaps, in between a full visitation and doing nothing. And something in the middle sometimes is worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And if you pass that up every time, at the end of the year, you lost real money.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really wise. One question before we move on, while this is on my mind, what led to the decision to sell the funeral home?
That's a good question, and it's an easy answer. We just didn't have Generation 5 interested in going into the funeral business. And you know what? The average age of a funeral home owner today is about 106. And then many of those kids don't want to go into the business because it's because of what they saw growing up. Dad was working all the time. Dad was taking phone calls till he went to bed, and sometimes even after he went to bed he was taking phone calls. I don't want that. I want to be able to have my weekends and go do what I want to do. I don't want to be bothered with that. I can find a job that doesn't require me to not be able to be with my families on all holidays and weekends and stuff like that. And so, our society and, generations change and how they look at things, So, funeral service has to adapt. And I think we've adapted pretty well. We used to immediately go after bodies in the middle of the night and bring them back to the funeral home. We don't anymore. A lot of funeral homes don't anymore. They wait till the next morning. If it's an institutional removal, you can have that body sit at the hospital until the next morning. If it's in a nursing home, probably you'll want to go there because you're not going to be friends with the nursing home staff going forward. And they happen to be in a pretty good place to refer you business in the future. So you might want to make those people happy.
No, that's really interesting. So was that the situation then with your kids? Just like saw how hard you were working, how busy you were.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they just they knew we had a very successful business, and they just didn't think that they wanted to go that way. And there's 4 grandchildren that had the possibility, and then my son came sometime later, and by then the company was already sold. And so he didn't really get a say in it, but the 4 preceding female grandchildren, they did. Yeah. And they went different directions. Those things called marriages, they get in the way, and those are very, very important. But, there's also, other things to pursue.
Yeah. So what was the transition like? Like, how long did you stay on for a while?
Yeah, I did. And I'm still associated with the company. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, I did an interview for the 100-year anniversary of one of the local celebrities here. Her name was Jessica, and it was on TV 15. If you want to see me talk about the 100-year anniversary, you can, with what I just told you, you can figure out how to get to it on Google. Anyways, it's good.
Do you ever get calls from the community still?
Yeah.
Are people calling you?
I do. Yeah, actually just today, I was, at my business group today, and it was with, like I told you, I was with one of our Congress people this morning. And then at my business group today, somebody came up and wanted to talk to me about doing pre-arrangements. And so, I gave some advice and suggested for them who to talk to at the funeral home. And anyways, and I'm sure I'll be talking to this guy again because, he wants to make sure that I'm involved in the process because we've known each other for 25 years.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So let's talk about your next business here on the list. Estate security. What was that one?
Yeah, that's the internal pre-need company. We had incorporated separately with McComb and Sons, and we had 10 pre-need counselors, and like I said, back in the late 80s is when we really got up and running with pre-need. But back then we were writing probably 3 to 4 million a year. Back in the late 80s, early 90s. And then by the time we're done, we're writing, I suppose, between 7 and 8 million. And, there'd be some of the forethought trips that half the people on the trip were our guys.
Yeah.
And so, I knew we were doing something right. I just seemed to be the right thing to do. And, apparently it worked. Not everything we tried did work. And we've had failures. In the past, but you learn from them. And, wish I could have had some of that money. We tried to write our own funeral service management software. And it went okay for a while, but, then we, found other ways to do it less expensive. And so that was a lot of money that went down the tube. But the money we spent on the contact management software for funeral service, it's been around a long time.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That one worked out.
You got 3 here that I think are kind of connected from my perspective, like Eagles, Wings Air, Inman Shipping, and Travel Plan by Inman.
Yep. Yeah, that they are connected. In 2007, I started Eagles Wings Air, and I have my president of the company worked for a cargo company here in town called Kitty Hawk Air Freight, and his name's Frank Kaiser. Anyways, Frank and I have been running this since then. In 2014, I bought Inman Shipping, and then with Inman Shipping came what they used to call, what Bob Inman, when he owned the company, used to call the Omega Plan. And the Omega Plan was a travel plan. And, when they first started out selling life insurance, it wasn't called life insurance, it was called death insurance. And then they figured out it was a whole lot easier to sell when they called it life insurance. And so it's kind of the same thing with the Omega Plan. So rather than call it the Omega Plan, well, let's call it something that people know, and that was the name Inman, because when we did a study on the name recognition Inman, back then it was really high, and most everybody in the industry knew the name Inman, so we kept that name and incorporated it with travel plan.
And Inman,
and so
like Inman Shipping, was it the same kind of product with, aside from the travel plan, like the Inman Shipping side, is it the same as Eagles Wings? Is it both like
no, different? Yeah, that's a great question. I should have clarified that. Eagles Wings Air does the air transportation of human remains, and thus the name Eagles Wings Air. And the name Eagles Wings Air came from the song that you hear at the end of the funeral, "On Eagles Wings," that beautiful song. And so we took that name from that song, because I've been on many funerals that ended up with that song. And I thought, well, that'd be a great name if people get it. And we have a really cool logo. And when people see it, they put it all together, and it's good. And now, so that's the air part. And then the air part includes, we work with major carriers, and like United, Southwest, American, Delta. And we're the largest human remains shipper for all four of those airlines. So we're very, very pleased about that. And we use a couple other cargo carriers, but mostly it's those four. And we make a deal with them, so the funeral home has a very small price to pay, or no price at all.
So let's talk about this, because I think this is super interesting, because I think once or twice I've seen, when I'm getting on like a plane, like I'm getting on a Delta flight, and you see like a casket make its way toward a plane, right? And so how many, what does this look like volume wise? How often do you think, how often is this happening? What does the whole process look like? Who's your customer, right? Is it the funeral home? Well, yeah, tell us more about this.
Yeah, when we first started, the research that we did, there's a Wall Street Journal article that stated they believe there was 175,000 bodies shipped by air within the continental United States. So that's the best info we have for that, because there's really no other way to track it. And you could go, I suppose, maybe using the national death certificate registry, and if they died out of town, then you have to, if it's more of a certain distance, then you have to make some kind of call. Well, that was probably sent by air, maybe it wasn't. So there's really no good way to know. And anyway, so that's how that company started, because there was a demand for, putting those things together, because spending the afternoon on the phone with Delta Airlines is not a good use of a funeral director's time. So a call to Eagles Wings Air lasts a pretty short period of time, and then we go to bat for them. Since we move a lot of bodies through their network, we have the cell phone numbers, the leaders of the cargo divisions of all those airlines. If something bad happens, either Frank or I will call them up and say, hey, we need help on this, and we need to get this situation resolved immediately. And so if you're a funeral director that ships 20 bodies a year, 30 bodies a year, no offense, but they're going to answer our phone call pretty quick. Because if we need to, we'll lean on them a little bit, because we're working for getting a body home for ceremony. Unfortunately, a lot of people set the time of the service before we make the flight arrangements. And so I've always said, please don't do that, because you don't know all the variables involved. Sometimes that it catches up with people, and most times it doesn't, but it's always safe to wait to set the service time until you get a flight schedule.
Okay. So the funeral home's the customer, they call you, you negotiate the delivery or the transfer, the flight. And then with that, is this something where like the flight price is just like a ticket price would be variable depending on.
Right. It's zone pricing. And, and basically the funeral director pays the same price to use us as they do calling the airline, and then they get the use of their own time.
Okay.
So it's, there's a small fee involved in it, but it's small.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting. And then the process then is like, you're just a van would take the person in a casket to the airport, probably like.
That's the funeral home will drop the person off at the airport, and we'll have all the paperwork ready, so they don't even have to do the paperwork. And then we handle all the billing. They don't have to take a check to the airport. They don't bother stopping by their accounting office and getting a check cut. That's all handled behind the scenes. Makes it really simple. The time savings of using Eagles Wings Air is the reason it's a successful company, because it makes funeral directors more efficient. A funeral director's time nowadays is really, really valuable. If you look in, all the publications out there have a section for, I need a funeral director for this. And, many of them, they're $50,000, $75,000. What is that per hour? And you're sitting around with the airlines on the phone and taking follow-up phone calls. You might have 2-3 hours involvement, and then why? And when you could be out doing, more interesting things for funeral service in your community than being on the phone with an airline.
Yeah. So interesting. So one last question on that. Is it typically like the baggage handlers? Are they the ones that would normally or is it like a separate group with the cargo?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, the bodies do go in the cargo area of an airplane. And they can't go on RJs. RJ is not big enough. The regional jets are not big enough, so it's typically, something bigger than an RJ. They can fit them in there, but it's difficult. So that's where the cutoff is. But normally, for liability purposes, according to the airlines, no more than one human remains per flight. But obviously, there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of flights that go through so the chances of you being on a flight with a body are really not that big. However, if you fly enough, most people have seen a body being put into the cargo section of the airport or the airline.
Yeah, so interesting.
And then moving on, and how does that differ from Inman?
Yeah.
Inman shipping if you look at that, is the ground transportation part. And Inman, over the many years, has been in business since 1978. We've grown relationships with 750 different either funeral homes or embalming companies across the United States. So we know who does a good job, and we know who does not do a good job. And then we have embalming standards for those funeral homes to follow in embalming bodies to make sure it's done correctly according to the standards of like Bernie Fountain from the Fountain Academy. He helped drop these standards along with Scott Gilligan, who used to be general counsel for the National Funeral Directors Association. And then those standards that's the byproduct of those guys working together with us.
So you've got like these 750 funeral homes, like you're kind of boots on the ground affiliates that they'll embalm and then transfer.
Right. We have agreements with them to be our service provider in a particular area. Some of the larger areas will have multiple service providers, and they act on Inman's behalf to go pick up a body from where the person dies, transport it back to the place where the embalming will take place, and then execute the embalming, place the person in a shipping container, and then tender that person to the airport, and then that's where they take over, where Eagles Wings Air takes over. So it's we're totally integrated, air versus and ground together. So both of those things happen at the just under one phone call sometimes.
Interesting. So you were probably working pretty closely with Inman with Eagles Wings prior to. Is that what kind of led to that introduction and acquisition?
Right. So Inman was one of our customers. And Bob and Marilyn Inman were getting up there in years. I think Bob died when he was in his 80s, and I think Marilyn died when she was in her 80s as well. And probably when we did the transaction, I think she was probably at least late 70s, early 80s. And it used to be in Cleveland, and then we retained the staff there in Cleveland for 4 years or more. We still have staff in Cleveland even today.
Okay. And then Eagles Wings is running out of Fort Wayne. You have some,
we have
some Inman folks as well.
Right. We're mostly a remote company now for both Eagles Wings Air and Inman because it just works better that way. It's easier easier for the staff. They don't have to, there's, it's the typical scenario. You can do things at home and then you have more time at the end of the week because you can do things during the day. If you, in between calls, you can eat lunch, you can let the dog out. Obviously, we want the people focused on what they're doing, but that's just how people conduct themselves. But we have staff on a number of different parts of the United States to cover for the time zones. And that's worked out really well. We didn't do that at first. We had people work until 8 o'clock here. But now we have people, in the Pacific time zone.
Okay. And then, so now the travel plan, Inman was already offering it, you're saying, calling it Omega. And then was it something that was a major focus of theirs at the time as much as it is for you now?
No, back in 14, when I bought the business, they were, it was like, for the whole company, it probably wasn't 100 sales a month. And it was, and we actually didn't focus on that. We were focused on making sure all the service details for Inman were up to snuff, and we upgraded the software and processes and a couple staff members that needed to move on. And but anyways, that was the major focus when we bought them, was that. And eventually we started the travel plan marketing, probably, I would say it was probably more like 5 years ago that we changed the name to Travel Plan by Inman. It took a lot of legal work. It took a lot of searching to find the insurance company to back up our plans. Our plan is not insurance, but our plans are backed up by insurance. And as far as I know, we're the only one out there that has clip insurance on each one of our plans. And what that is if somebody buys a plan from Travel Plan by Inman, they are covered for the cost of what it would be if they die within the plan rules. And so if we're not in business anymore, if the funeral home's not in business anymore that sold it, all they have to do is get on that card that they get, and then they would call, and then this company would find somebody to do it. The insurance company will.
Okay.
So it really gives an added protection. If you're a funeral home owner, you don't want to have 1,000 of these on your books and know that the travel plan is backed up by somebody's quote unquote fund. Or, if it's not insurance, okay, where's the money at? I mean, if the money is part of your general funds, it's probably going to be attachable in a lawsuit. So it needs to be an arm's length transaction. And that's what we thought. That's what our lawyers advised us to do. And so that's why we use CLIP insurance.
Is CLIP, is that an acronym for something?
Yes, it is. It's Contractual Liability Insurance Protection.
Okay.
So it's, per contract, it gets its own little number.
Okay.
And that's the backup for each one of those plans that we sell.
Okay.
So there's other people that use other travel plans. I just don't know why. Because ours is the best. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
And then you work with a lot of your sales efforts through it. Is that going through pre-need sales, or are you selling?
Yeah, we
direct?
work with third-party marketing companies. We work with cemeteries, funeral homes, and all over the country.
Okay, awesome. I'm trying to think if I had any other questions. That's super cool how all this has come together. So right now, though, in death care, what you're still currently running then is the Eagles Wings, Inman Shipping, and Travel Plan by Inman. That's awesome. And how big's the team there across those?
62, 63, I think is our total staff number right now.
Are there, I mean, so you're just down the street from like Messenger's just up the road from you guys, right? In like Auburn.
Yeah.
Cause I was just sitting here thinking, like, man, Indiana, you got Batesville, Aurora was there, right? And you've got you guys, Messenger. Indiana seems to be one of the death care states.
Yeah, it sure is. Batesville, they were, our supplier for many years with Forethought Life Insurance, well, Hillenbrand with Forethought Life Insurance, and then with Batesville Caskets. And we were, good customer of theirs, and they treated us well.
Yeah, it's a great state. We got, we inherited some of the Batesville employees. We acquired their website division here a couple months ago. So inherited some of their employees, just awesome people.
Yeah, they're so well trained. I mean, that's always
Yeah.
been one of their hallmarks of just having the most, finely trained people.
Yeah. And they're super kind too. They came out here to our company summer party and didn't win the cornhole tournament, which, usually you have some Midwesterners come out, which we've had before, and we get throttled. So they were, I think, taking it easy on these, posers in Utah. But, oh, this is awesome. You've got so many cool things going on. So, let's what about you? Like hobbies though? What do you like to do? And I mean, it doesn't sound like you leave yourself a ton of free time, but it's
Well,
important. What do you like to do?
I'm, I used to be a really pretty decent golfer. I had my handicap like at a 6 at one point, but that was more around the time I was going to mortuary college. So that was a long time ago. And then my son was in travel basketball, so that was pretty much the end of golf. Because for 7 years, and it was every weekend, and it was like any free time we were traveling. And so I don't do that anymore. But, I suppose one of my favorite things to do is fish. And it doesn't really matter what kind of fishing. I like deep sea fishing. I like fly fishing. Like week after next, we're going to go up for the salmon run up in Michigan. We've done it every year for 30 years, and love doing that. Love to travel. And I would say if anybody's listening to this and you're over age 55 and you're not doing some traveling, I will say to you, go travel. Go do it now. Find somebody to watch over your operation for a few days, because guess what? Life ends pretty fast. And, don't say at some time, I'm going to go do it. Just go do it now.
Yeah, that's great advice. My wife and I got started late with kids compared to others. I mean, my friends, talk about their kids going to college and getting, graduating high school, and ours are babies. But we took advantage of that when we were early married, traveled a lot before we had kids. But I think, not everybody gets that chance, and then they think it's going to come and then they just never do it. Yeah. So it's great advice. Yeah. What's maybe one of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome along the way? Like one of the hardest days or hardest time periods in your professional career?
Yeah. Probably we had a manager that was with us for a short time when we were at the funeral home, and he was kind of a hard-nosed guy. And we found ourselves involved with a union thing. And they had a vote, and we didn't become union, but it also made you open your eyes. Typically when people are looking at getting a union, you're probably doing something wrong. And so we corrected those things and made it better, because unions are good in some ways, and then in some ways they're not the most efficient. So it just depends on the circumstances, and that's why they're in the United States, because they do a good job representing workers. But in some cases, it's not the best option, and it's case specific. So that was a tough time, and probably not maybe as much for me as it was my dad, because my dad, he took it really personal. But anyways, we were fortunate the vote went our way, and hey, we learned from it. We'd made some mistakes. We had the wrong person, the wrong manager in the wrong place, and we corrected it.
Was that causing some turnover and other issues with the rest of the employees?
No, it was just causing unrest in the troops. And this guy, we didn't know, but he had some hard times at home. And of course, when people have hard times, they do stuff that they shouldn't do. And anyways, we corrected it. That's the big thing. You make a mistake, but you got to learn from it. And so we did. But that was a long time ago, but it was memorable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was 25 years ago.
Those painful days are really easy to remember.
Yeah. So one other thing about Inman, we just got done with some new programming, and we've incorporated the use of a QR code to keep track of all the little details, and even down to the paperwork. So when certain things happen, like when a doctor signs a death certificate, you scan the QR code, and then it goes and updates the database, and then you can access all this from either your iPhone or any other kind of phone. And then you don't need to call. You just look on the portal, and you can see what's been done and what's going to be done next.
So kind of like a chain of custody.
It is. And it keeps track of all that with a QR code. Anytime you buzz it, it updates the portal. And so you don't have to, like I said, get on the phone. You don't have to get on the computer. And it has made it tremendously easier and less time consuming.
What do you see in the future of your world in death care? Like what's going to be some of the biggest challenges, biggest disruptions, best changes?
I think I really still think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. I think this generation that is coming up right now in between 18 years old and 25 years old, I think they're coming back to seeing the value of funerals, believe it or not. I think we're actually seeing a little turn in this, from the baby boomers that really didn't see the value in a funeral or and see the value of going to church. Through my career, it was like they were on the same path. If in early in my career, when the pews were full, the funerals were good. And later in my career, people were doing more direct cremations and the pews in the churches were starting to get empty. And that was a direct correlation. And I think there'd probably be some other people watching that would attest to the fact that the pews in churches are starting to fill up again. And I think we'll see the same for funerals. I think people start having more meaningful funerals again. I think there's going to be kind of a lost generation. When people look back on the last 25, they're going to call this like the lost generation of funeral service, where we have millions and millions of cremated remains sitting in people's closets. Well, why? I mean, why aren't they in a place where they need to be? Why haven't we properly funeralized the dead? And if somebody comes up with a great idea for what to do with all these cremated remains, you will have yourself one tremendous business. And we can't in funeral service have the number one place for cremated remains to be placed is in a closet.
Yeah.
That says we're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So we need to improve. And I would love to see somebody come up with an idea for that, and I'd support them.
Yeah, and pets too, right? I mean, if you think how many American households have cremated remains and you include pets, it's probably more than half or more, right? I mean, so what do you think? Back to your point on just like the change, because I did the celebrant training a few years ago with Insight, and it was like there's this big push of the fastest growing religious group was just none, right? Like no religion at all. What do you think that is driving the change there, or folks are kind of coming back to seeing the pews are filling back up? What do you think is driving that?
I think the celebrants are a really good idea, because a lot of people, they're not churched, and the celebrant allows for a more meaningful relationship between the person that's going to execute the service and the family. Sometimes the clergy, if it's a busy church, doesn't have enough time to sit with the family and really create a meaningful ceremony. So I think there's real value in celebrant training and using an outside celebrant. I'm hoping the religious part of our society comes back more. I think it's a good thing. I think there's a spiritual part of everybody's life, and it needs to be attended to, and that's one of the reasons we have funerals.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm wondering, because I feel like is it people are just seeing there's a lot more clarity of purpose in their life and everything if they've got religion as part of it. I personally feel that way, but I'm wondering if you have any inputs on that, if you're seeing that in your community of people coming back to church, because I think that's really great. Yeah,
I think at least in our area, the pews, there's definitely more people in the pews than there were a year ago. And I think when people are really feeling safe and secure, sometimes maybe they don't go to church as much. It's kind of, when something really bad happens, you pray more to God, I suppose. And probably this situation is much different. I think there's a kind of a level of insecurity for a lot of people out there in the world. When you have your president being shot at, and public figures being shot at, and law enforcement, then that's not a real secure feeling for people. And it's no say about politics. It's just a fact. I think just in general, nobody should be shooting anybody. But that's going on in our world, and I think people are finding their way back to God, which isn't an all bad thing.
Yeah. That right now, Utah, it's super close to home. Charlie Kirk being here. I mean, that was
Yeah.
just, gosh dang, that was such a terrible week.
Yeah, that was, yeah, I was outside, and I was taking out a dock that was on a lake, and I heard that news, and I was like, I said, no, I literally, a guttural, just let it. I was like, it was just like, it just came out, and I was just
Yeah.
like, it wasn't. I couldn't believe it was true, and it
Yeah.
really hurt to hear that.
That was awful. I can't remember who I was. I was on a meeting with like a group of people, and I don't know if anyone else on the meeting caught the news while we were in there, but I got a text. And then I'm like, wait, what? And then I click and look, and I end up seeing them. I was just sick to my stomach and couldn't even really participate in the meeting. But, I think about it, like in my lifetime, there's really a handful of moments where you remember, like with a lot of clarity, like what happened that day, right? 9/11 is one of those, like what happened when COVID news started to hit, and this Charlie Kirk, like assassination is definitely one of those, I think,
Yeah,
where it hit us all so hard, where it was
yeah,
just like, what is happening? Like, this is
yeah.
the
It
wrong
was
direction for the country.
a massive body blow to a lot of the psyche of America. And once again, this is even though some people kind of see it as a political thing, I really don't. I just
Yeah, no.
I see it as just a really sad part in American history. A very lost young man went and did something because he got riled up, and he should have been seeing a counselor or something instead. And then and obviously, we get one of our really great young men with a great family torn to pieces. It's not right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was awful. Just that ability to just have open conversation and debate is just so important. So anyway, man, what a
Yeah, and it sounds
bummer.
like they're going to carry on their mission, and that's good. Open Discord, the light of day disinfects. It's just when all these things are happening behind the scenes, we got people, spending money to create problems. That's the kind of stuff that has to be stopped. And let's have open debate out in the open, and let the best ideas win. And sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're not going to win. Sometimes your idea is not the best one.
Yeah.
We all have to be humble sometimes and accept it.
Yeah, and I mean, on the funeral note here, we just saw probably the most widely viewed. I mean, they said like 20 something million viewers of the funeral on Sunday. I mean, that's probably the most viewed funeral ever.
Yeah,
Memorial
it
service.
probably was. And there's some reports that says 100 million views. I mean,
that's right.
Those
yeah.
astronomic numbers. And so that moves a culture. That's enough to move the needle on influencing a generation of people.
Yeah.
And it's horrible it had to be that way, but
yeah. Well, a couple more questions here is like, what do you want to see happen in funeral service going forward? Like advice to the industry.
We need to bring ceremony into a death at a higher rate than what we have been, and it's going to take some creative ideas to do it. It's an easy thing to say, not an easy thing to do, but somehow there's got to be ceremony attached to even a person thinks they want a direct cremation, and he's been in a nursing home for 5 years, and he hasn't talked to us in the last 3, and there's still something I think you can do to commemorate somebody's life. Gather around them, whether it's a prayer or poetry or something, but we have to bring back the value to human life. And I know it can't all be done by the funeral director; it has to be done by culture as well. But the ceremony it's the best thing for the family, and it is the best thing for the funeral director. There's, in the funeral director's perspective, because this is an economic business, there is no cost for a ceremony. There is a cost for a casket. There's a cost for a burial vault. There's a cost for a monument. There is no cost for a ceremony, and people value it. And if you present the value, you're going to have a lot of people buy it. Don't just automatically assume every cremation is a direct cremation. And there's companies out there that will check your staff on how you do on the phone. I would suggest you might want to use them. Have them call anonymously and see how your staff do answering the phone. It's a very painful experience. We had it done. It was not fun, but it made you change, made you do it better.
Yeah. Yeah. You want, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to get critical feedback, but man, is there anything more
It
valuable?
hurt.
Probably not.
And you think, yeah, we're doing great. We're the best funeral home in town. And you get this call and this, somebody says, yeah, I'm calling about a cremation, just wondering how much it is. Well, our cremation is $8.95. And if you have somebody on your staff answering it with the price without maybe getting a little bit more information, that is what a bad mistake that is.
Yeah. Great advice on the ceremony, though. I think of two things. Like, one is I was at a conference once and they talked about what makes great marketing, which, like marketing ceremony, probably a bit of a stretch, but they say great marketing makes you laugh or cry or feel something. And, I've always thought, like when it comes to marketing, it's kind of hard to do. Laughing's probably easier than the other two. But it reminds me of like we had a family, not our dog, but like my sister-in-law's dog pass away. And it'd been 6 months or so. There was this spot up by the lake that she liked to sit in the bushes, and they brought her ashes and gave everybody a chance to go spread a little bit in these bushes. And that was the ceremony, right? And family members who have no love for dogs were getting emotional doing that, you know? And for me, it was like, yeah, they felt something, right? Some of them cried. Like that ceremony, I think, even if it's just a small little event like that, it creates such a powerful and memorable moment that is going to be remembered, right, by the family. And if you as the funeral home can facilitate those feelings, they're going to remember how they felt forever, and they're going to associate that with the service that you provided to them. And I think that advice is really awesome.
Yeah,
So thanks
I
for
think
sharing.
that's great. And you brought up something really important here. Back when it was during wartime and we had TAPS, and TAPS was designed to exude emotion. And so if you're at a funeral of somebody that died that you knew, you cared for, and they played TAPS, that automatically inspired people to cry. And I'm going to divert just a second and go to kind of a Dr. Wolfelt kind of thing, but grief and mourning are two different things. Grief is an internal response to something catastrophic that happens, like losing your child. Somebody in your family gets in a car wreck, you lose your job. Those are grief things. Hurt your heart, hurt your stomach. Kind of when you heard of Charlie Kirk dying. It literally made me feel sick as well. And then mourning, on the other hand, is an external response to something catastrophic that happens. And it might manifest itself in tears. It might manifest itself in telling the death story. You've probably been around an older person that has told you the death story 25 times, and you think they're going crazy because they've already told it to you 24 times. Well, no, that is not them crazy. That's called mourning. And mourning is getting what's inside outside. And actually telling the death story is very therapeutic for people. And it's just, as somebody that cares, you have to be patient and listen and let them tell the death story 27, 28 times and even more times, and ask questions, because they might tell you that 25 times, but it's going through their head 2,500 times a day. And that's how people get better. You never get to a new normal, but you do get better. And our media, unfortunately, uses grief and mourning interchangeably, and they couldn't be any different. I mean, they are so far different from each other, because we have a lot of people in the United States walking around with unresolved grief, and they use alcohol and drugs to tamp it down. And that might be one of the reasons that we have, lots of problems today, is because people walk around with unresolved grief, not being able to get inside what needs to be outside.
No, thanks for sharing that. That's very educational. I don't think I've ever heard that before. That's awesome, man. Well, Dave, your story's awesome, incredible. I mean, you're a legend in death care. That's why we wanted you on this show we do here. Everybody could hear this. One final question that's just a total kind of coming from the side here, but is there anything about you that would surprise us? Something that most people in the industry wouldn't?
Wow. I don't know. Pretty open book, I guess. I don't know. I can't really think of anything. I got a really nice wife.
Yeah.
Everybody says I'm married up. That'd probably be pretty surprising when they see my wife and look at me and go, "How'd you get her?" Yeah, so that'd probably be it.
That's a good one. Can't complain there. All right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate your time so much today, Dave. Thanks to everybody that's listening, watching, and to PodCasket, where we tell the story of legends in death care. And catch us on the next episode and subscribe anywhere you're listening to this.